Well, good evening, everybody. We called this meeting to order at 6 o'clock on Thursday, the 13th of March. And let's see, we'll start with roll call.
Yes, Mr. Rendelman.
Here.
Ms. Wadsworth.
Here.
Mr. Morgan.
Here.
Chedemere will be here in 15 to 20 minutes. Ms. Hernandez. Here.
All right, the next item we have on the list here is the meeting minutes from January 9th. And I did not see them. Did we get a copy?
They're just up on the screen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is there any corrections to the last meeting minutes? I hear none.
I don't see any.
So I'll take a motion to approve the minutes as listed here.
I could make a motion to approve those minutes.
All right, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right. I'll say aye in favor.
Aye.
Any nays? Hearing none, the motion is passed. And I apologize, my nose is affecting my vocal cords today. All right, let's see here. Do we have any public comments? Are you here for a public comment, sir? Nope, they're just as an observer. All right. Seeing none, I guess we'll move on to discussion of new business items. Who is doing the committee best practices, guidelines, and rules? Is that Dayna?
This is Jacob.
Oh, Jacob. Oh, it's you. Welcome up. Come on up to the front here.
Hello, thank you for inviting me to come present to you guys today. I'm the city recorder for Oregon City, Jacob Wiley. If you don't know what a city recorder does, in other states they call them city clerks. So I'm in charge of public records requests, records management in the city. I manage the board and committee application process and elections. So that's kind of my role in the city. I'm a department head. And yeah, so I also provide this service for boards and committees, going over like public meeting law, public records, rules if it's related to the committee, that kind of stuff. So I'm here today just to kind of give you guys a broad overview. If you have some new members this year, I think, remind me.
Yeah, we just didn't have a presentation last year, but we have a few newer people.
Yeah, and this was like for like our email communications and how many people are responding depends on if it's something that needs to be recorded in public record or.
Right, yeah, we'll talk about
Okay.
electronic serial meetings.
I remember that. It's been a while. We haven't had that in a couple of years, things like. Okay.
It's just kind of a refresher for folks that have been here before. So we'll start with what has the city committee, or what makes a city committee tick, roles and responsibilities in public policy development, public meeting law, and what being a member of a public committee is all about. So what makes a city committee tick? So these are kind of the fundamental documents in the city. There's the city charter, there's the city code, there's the board and commission's orientation manual, and there's also TAC bylaws. So those are kind of the rules, the hard black and white rules that we have to follow here in the city. TAC is a creature of the city code, so that's where it came from. And TAC bylaws are something that maybe you all have reviewed, send to the city commission for approval potentially. Not every committee is a little bit different. Some committees, the bylaws have to be approved by city commission, sometimes not, but I'm not sure, I don't recall with TAC which way that
It
is.
seems like there is. We have some red lines that we'll probably present in the future.
So yeah, those are the black and white rules. And this is kind of more the role that boards and committees play in the city, where the city commission is defining the goals for the city, policies. They're the final governing body, the final authority, and they're accountable to the public through elections. The city manager answers to the, answers to the city, the other way around. The city manager answers to the city commission. And he implements the policies that the commission develops and approves, gives advice to the commission, and makes recommendations. Departments below the city manager, we're kind of more the operations, we provide expertise on certain areas, and feed that back to the city manager when necessary. And the committees, they're the way that departments connect directly with the affected citizens that we are working with. So connecting the community and community outreach for whatever programs and activities we're doing. So if you kind of see on the right-hand side there, the goals kind of in general kind of come down from above from the city commission. And the policy and input kind of goes up from the bottom. So if that makes sense. So the committees kind of are the interface with the community. Apologize if some of this is kind of basic, but it's a good refresher sometimes. So the role of the advisory committees, community oversight and public interest, providing that kind of feedback, help with policy suggestions and recommendations, maybe coming up with creative and innovative solutions that maybe department heads haven't thought of, and assisting staff with achieving the city commission's goals and priorities. And so it kind of is a loop I got on there. So we'll start on a little bit about public meetings. There has to be a public notice for all meetings of any governing body, subcommittee, committee, etc. So for example, TAC would need to have a public meeting notice for every meeting that you have. Meetings must be open to the public, so we have, public seating area. Minutes have to be created for each meeting. One question that comes up frequently is about social gatherings. Those are not public meetings as long as there's no deliberation about city work. So if you met at Dairy Queen for ice cream cones and you didn't talk about anything that had to do with your work at the city, you're okay. But if you start talking about, hey, there's a lot of traffic outside, you're getting in the gray, and if you start saying, that transportation plan that we reviewed last week, no, you've crossed the line. So there's kind of a spectrum there. It's up to you all to kind of use your discretion on that. Just don't meet to talk about TAC items without a public meeting notice. Serial meetings can occur electronically, like you brought up, Tim. That's why we kind of recommend that if you need to talk to other committee members, that you just send your request directly to your liaison, and then they'll communicate that with the other members. What you want to avoid doing is having a reply all conversation between a quorum of your members. So if you reply all, you are deliberating on your work here outside of a public meeting. Does that make sense? So nobody can participate or attend that meeting because it's electronic in an email. So there's no way that citizens can participate in that meeting in any way.
So when they're doing roll call, from prior to the meeting, and she'll send us out a thing about if we're going to be attending or not. I always respond just only to Audrey. I don't really do it the whole group so everybody knows. Does it matter if we say we reply to all so everybody knows you're going to be at the meeting tonight, or should it be just a singular confirmation back to Audrey?
It's probably. Let me say that what you're doing is correct.
Okay.
But technically, there is an exception for scheduling things that are not substantive in the meeting. So if it's just scheduling, hey, I'm free next Thursday, can we schedule our meeting at that time? That's all fine. Where it gets a little iffy is if that replying all conversation starts drifting into something else. That's where it's just my recommendation is to just use reply to your liaison.
Okay.
That way we're just safe, because we don't want to make it too much of a habit, because then it might end up with a mistake. Are there any other questions about that? So meeting management. So the role of the chair, generally there's no special powers given to the chair. What I'm thinking of is a strong mayor city where they have a veto power over whatever the rest of the committee's doing. We don't have that here. They're just another member of the committee. They should ensure that each member has an opportunity to speak, keeping the committee on task, efficiently move through the agenda items, maintain decorum. So intervene when necessary if there's any kind of lack of respect or unprofessional personal attacks, anything that would be, disruptive for the meeting. It would be on the chair to kind of intervene in some way, say like, hey, that behavior is not acceptable, or we believe that what you're saying violates our rules of decorum, something like that. The role of the vice chair just basically serves as the chair in the absence of the chair. So here's some more about voting a little bit. The way you would make a motion is like an item comes up on the agenda, you have a discussion, there's a motion and a second, further debate. Potentially, if you follow Robert's rules to the T, there is further debate after the motion and second. You might see that happen at the city commission level every once in a while. They'll have a motion and a second, and then they have a little bit of a discussion after that. If it's confusing or it's been a really long time since the motion and the second, the chair should restate the motion just to make sure that everybody's on the same page. And then you go ahead and vote. That said, we use Robert's rules as sort of they're adopted as our rules, but we use them as more of a guiding principle. That's why I have that funny meme over there. It's more of a guideline. So if we don't strictly follow them in every instance, because some of them are very, I call them tripping hazards. So sometimes the whole point of Robert's rules is to make meetings efficient and productive. And if some of the rules, I feel, this is my personal opinion, make it more complicated and less efficient. For example, like points of order, that would be something like if somebody said something that potentially violated a rule of decorum, that's what the example I have. Then the chair makes a ruling, point well taken. So that would be like the chair's doing something that a member doesn't feel is correct. Then if it's not resolved at that point, you can resolve it with a vote. Another one that comes up a lot, there's a couple that are more of my pet peeves. The call to question and tabling are a couple of them. So tabling an item, we frequently will have committee members, even the commission will say, well, we'll just table that and bring it up later. Technically, that needs to be voted on to table, and then to remove it from the table, there has to be a second vote when it's taken off the table. And it would have to be at that meeting or the next meeting. So that's the technical rule. The other one would be motion to call the question. You'll hear folks say that when people are getting ready to vote. You can kind of tell the direction of everyone, say like, oh yeah, let's call the question. Technically, that's a motion to end debate. The chair has to ask for a second. There has to be a 2/3 majority vote, and then a vote on the item directly. So it's really a motion to close debate. Really what that means in reality when we run a meeting is can we have a motion to approve the item, and then there's a single vote. But technically, with a motion to call the question, there should be 2 votes. Another one that I just want to mention is appeal. That would be if the chair does something and makes a decision, say like on a point of order that folks don't like. They can appeal that decision, and then it goes to a motion, a second, and a vote to overturn the chair's decision. Doesn't come up very much, but I thought I'd bring it up. For voting, there's 2 different kinds of voting. There's roll call style voting, where every member's vote is recorded individually. So you would go around, say this person, they vote, this person, they vote. This is what we do at the city commission. It's mainly so that we can meet that requirement that I wrote in this on the bottom there, to accurately show who voted for what thing. The other kind of voting method is acclamation. So I noticed you did that for your minutes. All in favor say aye. You must ask for the nays or the vote is invalid. You also have to ask for abstentions, just in case somebody voted neither yay or nay. And the reason for that is being a little persnickety here. It's fine. But Oregon law requires that the vote of each member be recorded in the minutes. So if we theoretically had somebody that abstained, I don't think this is the case, but if there was somebody that abstained and they didn't ask for the abstentions, we wouldn't know who voted for what. Like if you think of an audio recording, that's why. So if you think in an audio recording, all in favor say aye, you hear a clatter of noises. All against say nay, silence. Abstentions, silence. We know how everyone voted. So in the minutes, we can put, this person voted this way, this person voted this way. There's type of answers, A, nay, and abstentions. Yeah, we talked about that. Another one that comes up frequently is conflicts of interest. And for you guys, luckily, it's not much of a problem because in Oregon law, it's focused primarily on financial benefits or detriments. And because none of the decisions you're making directly affect use of money, you don't really have the opportunity to have a conflict of interest on any item. But I wanted to bring it up. So it would be the financial benefit or detriment for the public official, a relative, a business, yada, yada, yada. There's two kinds of conflicts of interest. A potential conflict is one that you may have a financial benefit from, and then an actual conflict of interest, which is like, we're discussing awarding a contract to buy hammers, and I own a hardware store, and the contract is with my store. I can't participate at all in that discussion. So the procedure for that, if it's a potential conflict, you have to announce the conflict when it comes up, but you're allowed to participate and continue to. You don't have to abstain even in the vote. If it's an actual conflict, you have to announce the conflict and cannot participate in the discussion nor vote. So in that case, you could think of it as like you should really just stand up and sit in the back as if you're not actually in the board at that time. No, you necessarily have to stand up and leave the dais, but think of it like that. You can't participate in the discussion. You can't vote. The other thing that comes up kind of frequently, usually it's somebody that's thinking a little too hard, is the class exception. So if you're voting on something that indirectly affects you because you're a member of the group that it affects. So my example that I always think of is the tax rate. Everybody that's on the city commission is a resident of the city. If they vote to change the tax rate, it indirectly changes their tax rate. If it were true that they couldn't vote on anything that financially benefits or detriments them, no one could vote on tax rates. So that's something, is the class exception. So if you're a member of a class that would benefit or detriment from this, you're fine. It's not a conflict of interest because you're just a member of this group that happens to benefit from it or detriment from it. So is there any questions about conflicts or any of that? Not that it matters too much for you, but.
No, I don't think so.
I was curious about the Oregon law that requires the votes of each member be recorded. Should we be looking for our name followed by yay or nay in the minutes? Or is it okay to just say the board unanimously voted for something and that would indicate that everyone who was present was voting yay?
I think that would cover it. If you're saying, it would be clear from reading the minutes who voted which way. I think that's what the law is trying to tell you to do.
Okay.
Is make sure that you know that basically we have a prohibition on secret ballots.
Okay.
We don't want to have anonymous votes. We want to know who voted for what. And I think that your example, you know who voted for what because it's unanimous. So it's everyone that was there that day, right? Right. Another question that comes up enough, I almost missed it. Yes, you can vote aye on minutes for a meeting that you weren't in attendance for. You have to think of it, I often hear the example of like a bus or a train. The committee is a bus or a train, and people get on the bus and people get off the bus, but the bus is still just a bus. I don't know if it's helpful or not, but that's the phrase that's used. You're just a member of the committee approving the minutes. It's not your personal affirmation that this is what actually happened at that meeting. It's the committee approving the process. The minutes are correct. If you feel the need, you can always request the recording and confirm it with your ears, but it isn't necessary. So you don't have to abstain if you're absent, basically. All right, being a member of a public committee, these are just sort of just general principles. No favoritism, try to treat all customers and clients equally. And this would be like residents with no special favors for friends or family. There's no special privileges for being a member of this committee. You want to follow confidentiality rules, but most of the information that you're talking about, don't have to worry about confidentiality too much. No profiting from city business, either directly or on the side, obviously. Do I have it on here? Yeah, it's later on. No outside work that conflicts or interferes with your position as the TAC member. State law limits accepting gifts, so that's true of you as well. If somebody's in the context of TAC saying, hey, I want to give you a gift certificate to get a discount on tires because you're on TAC, there's limits on that. No personal use of city property, so please don't go out and borrow the city car and go for a joyride. Report violations to city staff if you see any. I wanted to see if you guys had any takeaways or any other further questions.
Question that I've brought up a couple times where I've had to speak with other city governments, agencies, whatever. And if I go as a citizen, you know, I always tell them I'm a member of the TAC committee, and I'm not speaking on behalf of the TAC. And this is only my opinion as a personal. Is that a disclosure we should be using?
I think that's a good idea.
Okay.
Yeah. You want to be really clear
They'll
that.
say, like, I recognize you, where do I have seen you before? And I go, probably at a TAC meeting or something like that. And,
Right.
and then I'll tell them, you know, that this is not official business. It's about us complaining about what you guys are doing up the hill there or something.
Yeah. If you want to be careful with representing yourself as TAC when you're in other groups. So if TAC were to vote on some letter of support or something, that's kind of the message. And you can say, hey, I want to appoint the chair as our spokesperson related to this item. That's fair then. Then you can say, yes, I'm here as TAC, right? But you want to be careful if you're just out and about doing your own thing and you happen to be a member of TAC, but you're not representing TAC or you don't have the authority to speak as TAC, then you want to, it's just a good policy to kind of say, hey, I'm here just as me, not as TAC. It's a good idea.
Anybody else have any questions or scenarios they'd like to bring up?
All right. So we'll put it back on a slide that Audrey has. There's some materials that I thought I wanted to share with you in case you're interested or want some more information. There's the public records and meetings manual. They just recently updated it. It's the 2024 version, but I swear I didn't see it until December. So it's brand new. There's the OARs there for the rules for public meetings. There's the OGEC guide, and the last one there is a website called Jurassic Parliament. They have a really, really fun way of teaching parliamentary procedure, like Robert's Rules of Order. She uses dinosaurs as motions and throws them. It's great. It's good stuff. So if you want some entertainment while you learn parliamentary procedure, I recommend Jurassic Parliament. With that, I'll let you guys get back to your substantive items.
Well, thank you for attending. All right.
Thanks again, Jacob.
We have no interview questions. Appealing the Oregon speed zone review outcome. Is that for you, Dayna?
The interview questions go next.
Oh, but we didn't have any interview. Oh, we're going to discuss the interview
Discuss them,
questions.
yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Sorry about that. So our next item is the interview questions for future candidates. And I think we've always used the standard ones that were developed by our former chairman. So, has anybody, there's a total of 9, any additional questions that we should add or corrections to the 9 that have been listed?
I provided some detailed comments to Audrey, and just she suggested that I bring them up in the public meeting rather than, start an email correspondence, not in the public meeting, along the lines of what Jacob was just talking about. So, for the second question, rather than, are you familiar with the stated purpose of the committee? I would suggest, what do you see as the main functions of the committee? Just because part of the reason for that suggestion is we've gotten some people who are not necessarily aware of the stated purpose, but they might be willing to go into details as to what they see as the main functions of TAC, even if they're not perfectly aware of what it says in our city code along those lines. And then question 3, it reads now, is there a specific transportation issue that you're most concerned or passionate about? I would make it a little bit more expansive so that people just don't say, I'm into biking, or I just care about the 205 bridge as my top issue. I'd like people to talk about more than one issue. So I would suggest that we revise it to, which transportation issues are you most concerned and passionate about? Questions 4 through 7, I didn't have any comments on. And then for question 8, we're no longer meeting monthly necessarily. So, but we do have other events that are going on that we're encouraged to attend. I'm thinking neighborhood events. I'm thinking when we are, let's say, going to an event that is jointly held with the police department, such as National Night Out. So in revising that question, I suggested the committee expects TAC members to attend meetings about monthly, which includes our regular meetings and outreach to neighborhood associations and special events. Are you able to commit to attending meetings for TAC at about this frequency? So Audrey has those suggestions, and if you all are okay with them, we can just kind of see how that works when we interview our next person, and I feel like we can always, make other adjustments as needed.
I think question number 7 really trips people up when we're interviewing them. And I think it's rather uncomfortable. I feel like it's a trick question for them, and I don't really like making people feel that uncomfortable.
Do you have a suggestion on what kind of word we could replace that question with?
I do not. I just know I did not like that question. And I just noticed it, when our current member had to go through this again, and he's on the board, or on the committee. I just don't think the wording in that, whether it be removed completely or reworded.
I mean, I think
You're a good wordsmither.
I think there's a relationship, right? Like, I mean, for somebody that's in that sphere, like, to me that makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's what I do. But somebody that doesn't, that, yeah, you're right. It's so I'm not sure how to. Do we take it out or we wordsmith it?
I respectfully, Chris, I'd like to keep it in and see people squirm with it. See how people react to it. if they're able to take a stab at it, that would be great, especially since Dayna, as Public Works Director, is here and directly in charge of land use and transportation for the city. So there are lots of relationships that you could bring up between land use and transportation. We're not going to catch someone in a wrong answer, but can they engage with the issues in an extemporaneous manner? I'd like to see that from our future TAC members.
Dayna and Vance, do you guys have any suggestions on how that should be, if it should be rephrased, or do you like the ability to stump somebody?
So this is my opinion. I've seen many interviewees tackle that question, and there's not a textbook right or wrong answer necessarily, but more often than not, we will get an answer that is really way off what the question is trying to get to, or they just don't have an answer. So based on that, I don't think there's much value in the question the way it's worded. I agree with Chris. I just don't like the question. I also agree with Raymond that there's some validity to asking a question that gets from the interviewee something out. Do they know how land use in the planning world, right? What relationship does it have with transportation in planning, and how do those two things work together? So I would say if y'all looked at that and maybe reworded it, I think it could be beneficial. I would say if the opinion of the board is to eliminate the question, I think it would be good to come up with another question, because these interviews go pretty quickly. That's not a lot of questions, especially the last one is, do you have any questions for us? Sometimes people have some they don't. Question 8 is, again, just getting to their ability to commit, and usually that's a yes. I've never heard anybody say no. So to have really just 7 questions that are getting to what the applicant, feels strongly about, knows about TAC in the city, and then potentially knows about land use and transportation. I mean, I think the question itself and that concept has some merit, but do I know how it should be reworded?
How about the word impact?
What's that?
Impact. The relationship, between the impact of land use and transportation, so that if we go ahead and put 400 homes, how's that going to affect the road that's servicing it now? What improvements does that road need? Maybe that might help the person responding to the question to understand.
Could even give them an example.
Because I think the word impact, how is land use impact affecting transportation?
Yeah.
That's really kind of what the question is, I think.
Yeah.
And I remember stumbling on it too.
Because I have heard applicants, more than one, their answer is, okay, land use and transportation. Well, you've got this land, and there's hills, and there's curves, and they're physically thinking about the geography of the land, and that's obviously not
And
what
then
that
there's this
question is.
construction company that has this bulldozer and is going to go right through this.
Right. Right.
So that's a question we can look at, maybe number 7, to maybe change the word impact in it somehow, rephrasing it.
Yeah.
To make it a little easier to understand.
And I will say that because we don't have any applicants outstanding, correct?
Yeah, we're okay right now.
In my opinion, you all have time to noodle on it for,
A week or for the next month.
yeah, exactly.
Are we full on members right now? We do have 2 openings?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
So Petronella's and Tim's.
okay.
I'm sorry, what was the second one?
Oh, Tim. Did I say Tim?
Henry.
Henry.
Which Tim used to be with us.
Tim's right here.
Oh, I was thinking of another one.
Okay.
From a couple years ago.
You could say something like, do you have any experience with transportation? Do you have any experience how transportation may affect land use or may impact land use.
So I don't want to jump in the agenda, but, and I don't want to use Jacob's word of table. But maybe some of these
defer it.
conversations about local street standards might lead us to a question that would be more appropriate. So I can noodle it a little bit, and see if I can come up with some options.
I mean, I guess what ultimately we're trying to get somebody here that to me is passionate about transportation and an impact that it poses on all of us. So we're all here trying to make the system function better for. So I don't know. I mean, I think some of these questions, you know, you could have a discussion with somebody and have only like half a dozen questions, not even this many to really see if that's something that they're passionate about.
I was going to propose that we actually maybe summarize some of what the TAC does and then start off with, like, why do you want to be on the TAC? You know, are you familiar with the purpose? If not, what do you think, you know, it is or whatever? To not leave them stumbling for things. Like, I don't think at the end of the day, if they're here, that's because they're willing and they're wanting, there's some desire to participate in the committee. They may not have the best answers, but I think, you know, and then in all fairness, I think some people are great at interviewing and some people are not. Doesn't mean that they're not, they're not great people. And I think ultimately we want people on the committee that are passionate about wanting to help and make things better. So I think if we can provide them maybe some, you know, just a quick summary while they're here of, like, you know, some things, like I said, even if it's with this land use question, you know, there at times there are projects that may, you know, transportation projects may affect land use. Do you have any experience with that? And if not, how, what do you think would be involved? Or I don't know, something like that.
Well, what about, I mean, there's an application, right? These are questions, right? So application itself could be done in such, redone in such a way where you do exactly what you're saying, explain some of these things and why are we here? And so then I think that could, you know, then I think the person would understand what they're answering.
Okay, so it looks like question 2 and 7 are the ones of concern. Anybody else have another number that needs to be looked at?
I would say 5. It says, what are the primary transportation issues? I would say, what do you think are the primary issues, transportation issues facing Oregon City?
That's an easy fix.
Yeah. What do you believe?
And, yeah, I'm fine with adding impact, to number 7. I'd be curious as to what, Dayna comes up with as well. Would that work for you, Chris, in terms of solving some of the
absolutely.
issues with it?
Yeah, I just don't like the way it currently is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we can create a question with a little more context. This is sort of like when you apply for planning commission and they ask you, do you know the difference between quasi judicial and legislative hearings? And everyone
Yep.
goes,
Should I leave now?
So for number 5, here's the easy fix. Remove what and replace it with what do you believe are the primary transportation issues facing Oregon City?
Should we like, can we like make a,
Can we make a motion?
Can we make a motion?
Yeah.
and make a.
All right, I can, okay, let's do this. I'll make a motion
Tabling it to next.
that we start, question number 5 is, what do you believe are the primary transportation issues facing Oregon City? So it's your observation,
Yeah,
not what the city knows what's the problem.
wouldn't
The
my,
city may not know there is a problem. So I think this will be a little bit more open, what they think on their experiences and the thing. Number 7 is the impact between land use and transportation. And I think Dayna's going to make a motion that she will work on some content for that. And then we can vote on it at the next meeting. So maybe if we have it printed out in our next packet, we'll be pre-prepared.
yes, I love that idea to bring it back to the next
And
meeting.
we'll pre-prepare to give you a yes or no, or a comma. That needs to be somewhere. I think the other questions are pretty well, question number 8, we don't know if we're meeting month to month, or we were meeting, was it bi-monthly? Yeah. So, because that can be changed up to month, maybe depending on the schedule and time of the year. On the other ones, I think it's pretty straightforward, like number 6, telling somebody, having them telling us what their greatest asset would bring to the organization. And the modes of transportation, what do you use? You know, we had that one guy, Ray, was it Ray?
Ray Atkins.
Who was this only bike guy? I mean, he went everywhere on a bike. I wonder how he's doing down in Petaluma.
It's probably much warmer and drier.
Yeah, drier. But I think he's the only one ever did something different that I know of.
Ride your bike, do you?
So Tim, if I could make a quick recommendation, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Actually to the board. As mentioned earlier, I think we all agree that it would be good to noodle on this for a while,
Okay.
board and staff. So if we could table this, Dayna has another engagement this evening, and I'd like to make sure we give her time to do that. I don't want to cut this short, but since we've all kind of agreed that it should come back, let's, if we can kind of round this one up and then
So
let-
I'll make a motion that we table this for the next meeting and put in that little box over there that we were talking about. Do I hear a second? All right. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstention? All hearing unanimously passed.
You listen to Jacob's training.
Yes. Even with my cold, I could still remember. My cold, it won't blow a nose. It
Because
won't
we'll
blow.
leave in 15 minutes.
All right, next item, we have appealing the Oregon speed zoning review outcome. Is that Public Works?
That is Raymond. He had asked me to put it up there.
Yeah, I just wanted folks to be aware of it more than, needing to take an action on it. It's more informational. Since we do talk about these speed zone reviews a lot, and we'll have no doubt more coming down the pike, if there's ever a situation where we disagree with the outcome from ODOT, we have the opportunity as a board here to make a recommendation to City Commission that we pursue it, or a recommendation to staff that they pursue an appeal and potentially overturn ODOT's decision on a speed zone review. So I just wanted to throw it out there as a potential agenda topic for, a more specific situation in the future if we do have speed zone decisions that we disagree with.
So is there a form that we can follow when we want to appeal?
So kind of we follow the process on the right-hand side. And essentially at the top, the road authority, which if it's a city street, it would be the city requests that the speed zoning occurs. And so then there's kind of, I'll call them kind of teal, greeny color boxes. That's where ODOT does their technical review. And then that yellow box is where they make their decision, and then they notify back the road authority. And then the road authority either accepts it or doesn't accept it. I think in this situation where we don't accept it, it would have to be because it doesn't meet the guidelines and the standards set in the Oregon Speed Zone manual. So there is a whole technical manual of how ODOT conducts that investigation and that research and sets the speed limit. So it isn't kind of a personal opinion, it's a scientific, review. They do look at crashes and they calculate crash rates per million vehicles, and so there's pieces that they look at. It's a pretty technical process. So yes, the city does either accept or, try and renegotiate. I've not been involved in one where we've been able to renegotiate. And that we've not gotten to the point where we've requested a state speed zone review panel look at it. But I suspect that panel is filled with technical experts.
And now you would have to probably expert that.
I would probably have to hire a traffic engineer to be able to fight the speed.
I want to follow up. So is the city going to pursue setting their own speed or no, or decide not?
In order to get, and I'm going to forget the correct word, authorized or certified, you have to do 10 under the kind of observation of the state. We don't even have 10. And
Okay.
we tried working with the county to see if they would do them on our behalf. They have their own long list and their own staffing challenges. So I think at this point, we are not pursuing moving forward with, being able to set our own speed limits. We would still have to follow that state guideline. So it's just a question of who's doing the work.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing none?
If we don't meet the requirements, is there a need for this then?
Well, we would still use the same process. So for example, when we did Glen Oak, the city submitted a request to the state and it follows this process. And then the state comes back, they provide me the full investigation, and then the city either accepts it, and so they require us to respond back accepting, we've reviewed their investigation, we agree with their, categorization of the geometry of the roadway and site distance and, all those kind of pieces.
What is the duration for these steps? So for like the blue, are we talking months, years?
Glen Oak, I think, took 2 years from the submittal to the decision. That was, I think, in kind of some of the COVID timeframe. But yes, it is not fast.
Yeah,
They're the only ones doing the work.
the 213 was 2 years.
Yeah, Glen Oak and 213 they were both submitted about the same time, and we got the answers back about the same time.
I asked just for knowledge and awareness, so like somebody sitting on the TAC, are they gonna, in their time here, are they gonna see something advance? What's the likelihood that they're gonna see something change? And so it would be great, I know this is ODOT's, but to see how long it takes from the initial review or submittal to the other steps to where there's finally a decision made. Just again, for knowledge.
I've heard they're a little quicker than the 2 years now, but I haven't submitted any, so I don't know firsthand.
So, my one question I have for staff is, I guess we don't have, just to verify, we don't have any active applications for reduced speed right now. We have a list of areas where we think there could be potential applications. And then I also wanted to verify that if we ever wanted to pursue the 20 is Plenty program, that's a whole separate deal where we could say residential streets are now 20 miles an hour, and that would go through a separate process that doesn't have to go through this type of review.
The 20 is Plenty is an option that the city commission can adopt. as long as it meets the state criteria.
Where else in the city do we see potential for reduced speed zones at the moment? Like, what are some of the other identified streets?
So right now, the only area that has the 20-mile-per-hour speed limits is in the Kneeman neighborhood. The Kneeman neighborhood requested it. So they submitted a formal request to their neighborhood association, to staff and the city commission requesting it. In general, the city commission prefers that something like that come from the neighborhood association with support from the neighborhood, not initiated by staff.
And how about, that's helpful context, how about other streets, like you mentioned Glen Echo 213? Do we have other streets that are maybe in the 40 mile to 50 mile an hour range that we see could go down to 30 or something along those lines?
I don't know of any.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know that we have any city streets that get up really to the 45. I don't know of any, Raymond,
Yeah.
that are sort of on the list, if you will, at this time.
We took a little bit of a look when we were looking at the opportunity to kind of set our own speed limits, and I wasn't able to come up with 10 streets that we thought we could kind of work through that process. And we had done just a very, very high-level technical review where we mapped the posted speed limit with the results of our traffic counts, kind of overlaid on that. And I think when we did that, I think the standard was still setting the speed limits at the 85th percentile. And so we had a little, and there were not 10 streets that were likely, based on that single criteria, to qualify for a speed zone reduction.
Okay, so maybe I misunderstood when you said there weren't 10 streets. I thought there was a number between 1 and 9, not 0 streets. So anyway, sorry for the confusion there. If the number is 0, then
Yeah, I mean, there's
apologize
probably a
for
few that would qualify. We haven't, there's a long list of criteria, and we took the one set of data points that we had and tried to compare those. And when we were trying to get to a recommendation to move forward with the program, we didn't have enough streets that we thought would even qualify to go through and, for staff or to hire out, doing that entire review process.
Okay. Any further discussion? We're all satisfied. All right, moving on. Public Works report. Looks like, Dayna, you have local street standards up next.
Yeah, so I don't remember when it was, but a year or more ago, you had the Planning Commission attend your meeting and request that we look at some local street standards. And after those discussions, I think we talked about including that work in a transportation system plan update. At this point, we were working with the state on transportation system plan funding that was coming out of, I believe it came out of the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities work. The state has since rescinded that funding, and so we do not currently have a funding plan for a transportation system plan update. And so with some recent land use projects, there's been community frustration over the traffic impacts that those new developments create on adjacent built neighborhoods. And so there's been a lot of public comment at City Commission when they're hearing land use items between Planning Commission and City Commission. And so there's been discussion about creating local street volume standards. So essentially, identifying possibly a number of vehicles that are allowed to drive on a local street before it's considered unsafe. So, and that would become they're looking at putting that into the code as a condition of approval for land use approvals. So we've had a transportation consultant do a first kind of presentation on this a few months ago. And I think the plan is to take back some information to City Commission on April 2nd. And confirm if they want to move forward with this. So the scope of work that they would be looking at would be identifying 20 local streets that we would do data collection on. And so those streets would be representative of an ideal local street that they would want to kind of replicate. So this, asking them to help provide staff direction on what is that local street that you're trying to create everywhere and that you do not want to go above. So that will be a discussion with the City Commission on April 2nd. That's at a regular meeting, so there is public comment. I don't have a whole lot more than that right now.
But how do you, so you have to establish what's the, I guess, an accepted level of volume currently on these streets. And then you have a new development that's going in, that's tying into those existing streets. Of course, there's going to be an impact, but how do you, how do you manage that in the sense if you're adding a 200 lot subdivision, those streets were envisioned to go there, you're kind of almost like, you would be almost preventing the development from occurring when it was originally planned to expand. And what is that I'm wondering what is acceptable level of the traffic? Is it 5 trips or is it 100 trips? Like, at which point no longer is that safe? That's to me is kind of, you're kind of like limiting what you intended originally to happen.
I think these are all the questions that are being asked. This idea that, could one option going forward be that when you build your subdivision, you provide traffic calming within your own subdivision? So developer A builds their subdivision and, today they're just building their local streets. They're not putting in bump outs or, being asked to look at the neighborhood traffic fact sheet that gives all kinds of options for calming traffic. That's not a requirement to construct any of those components today. And maybe one of the options is you build the traffic calming today, knowing that that street that ends in a barricade that says this street will be extended will someday have the next housing development.
But that would, to me, would be a best practice. I think you would want to implement that in your standards. The planning commission or whoever is, you're approving a subdivision and you're also asking developer to look to future expansion. And so that's an urban growth boundary and that subdivision is going to happen. So I think you would ask developer A to build it for a future condition, not, or they pay a fee in lieu and then city goes, or the developer B goes back into the existing subdivision and modifies everything to accommodate.
Yeah, and I think these are all the things we would toss out there. If the first developer doesn't build it and everybody has on-street parking, and then the second developer comes in and puts bump outs and takes away the parking, that creates a different issue in the neighborhood. So I don't know that they've given staff direction on what they expect us to prepare for them. So I think that's what this meeting on April 2nd is.
What about roundabouts? Are they considered a slowing of traffic, or is it more a flow of traffic?
So usually a roundabout would be put in lieu of a traffic signal. I think our fact sheet has what we call a traffic circle, like a mini roundabout, which is really just to kind of slow folks down. I don't think the intention would be to ask for a roundabout at the intersection of two local streets. Maybe that smaller traffic circle.
I know of a developer who said that the last time he was gonna build in Multnomah County, is he had to put a roundabout, it cost him $1 million in 2019, just to make the circle. And so that's why he said, I'm only gonna be building in Clackamas County or Washington County and so I thought, well, maybe that's a reason for them, that they're planning to slow traffic down. I mean, I don't know, like if you go over to Central Oregon, Bend is on steroids with roundabouts. Even the highway was at 22, now has 4 or 5 of them before you even get into town. But it does slow the traffic down. It keeps it moving, but it does bring the speed down. So I was just wondering if that may be something the cities are looking at in future developments as a way of keeping traffic speeds down, but keeping the flow going. You need a lot of land, though, to put those in. They do gobble up a lot of road space. Interesting. All right. Any further discussion on that? Because we want to keep you on schedule. Hearing none, we'll go to Vance on the evacuation plan, general information.
Okay, hi everybody. Not a huge amount to report out on tonight, but I did want to mention a couple things. So for a little over a year, the county has been working on evacuation plans and routes. Early on, they hired Kittleson to assist them through the process. Myself, about a year ago, John Lewis, the chief of police, representatives from the county and Kittleson met at the police department. Kittleson sort of went over some concepts and ideas of what they would like to develop for the county. If you go to the next slide, please. So this is an example that they showed us at that meeting. As you can see, it's City of Milwaukee. And this would be an example that folks could either get online, on the city website or the county website. There's a QR code you can see on the lower right. I think the intent also was to have these placed in key areas around town. That's yet to be determined. That's the last meeting I had with the county to go over this. That was technically phase 2. But as you can see, there's a bunch of good features on there. Directionality, showing the direction that people would want to take to evacuate. Obviously, they have a legend, compass showing north, emergency number, website link, emergency notifications. Again, that QR code, so people could scan it, have it on their phone. So I thought I'd include this. Sorry it wasn't in your packet. I threw this at Audrey today at about 3:30, so apologies for that. But it kind of gives you an idea of what I'm kind of expecting to see as a deliverable from the county. Thanks, Dayna. And when we looked at it about a year ago, I think there's a lot of merit to having the city, certainly the county, broken up into quadrants and sections. I can foresee the city doing the same thing at some point. Mm-hmm. But we here at the city so far have been kind of waiting for the county to come out with their big plan, which will certainly, affect roads here in Oregon City. And then if we think it needs to be drilled down even further, at that time we'll make that determination and refine it more to suit our city's specific needs.
So does Clackamas County need to have a topic to start working on this, or are they working on this?
They've been working on it for a year and a half.
Okay, so.
Because again, what you're seeing here is what was presented about a year ago in their phase 2. So the county's been working on it quite a long time. And in fact, they're currently on phase 3, which is focused on gathering community feedback and to inform public outreach through focus groups, surveys, things of that nature. I think Audrey sent out a survey that Clackamas County had sent out to all the jurisdictions. I took it. It's pretty quick. I'd encourage you all to go ahead and open it up and give it a look. It's pretty high level, as you might imagine, but that's one of the tools county's using to garner some public feedback. Dayna was telling me that the last she'd heard, the county is hoping in May or June to have some more outward reaching information and outreach to the public. So I don't know that we're going to see much of anything in results or maps. If we do, I'll absolutely put them on the next meeting agenda and share them with you. But right now, I don't have too much other to share than that.
So my question would be, would they be able to, when they establish the route, can they put signage that it says evacuation route, kind of like on the coast where you have tsunami signs,
Yep.
you know, where to go for high land because they're more concerned about flooding out there.
Right.
And if we have that, and then the other question would be, would the city be able to control traffic lights to have green flow to keep the flow going instead of the traffic jams that everybody was running into going through, you know,
Right.
6 cars getting through a light and then, you know, it just piles up, so that they'd have some way of controlling those lights to give those routes flow.
Your first question, signage was discussed at that meeting that I attended about a year ago. At that time, no decisions had been made on signage, but it's something that, as I recall, collectively, the group, meaning myself, John, the police department, thought could definitely have some benefit. So it's been discussed. Again, to my knowledge, nothing's been decided on signage yet. Now, that's at the county level, right? At the city level, depending on our routes and how we want to, think about them, devise them, implement them. Certainly, at the city level, we have carte blanche to install signage if we think it's really going to be usable.
Well, when you consider the fire, when we had the fire, I've never seen so many horse trailers in my entire life in one town. And they weren't coming from Oregon City. They were coming from south of us. And so that's part of the county that's flowing through Oregon City to get to 205 as an escape route. So as long as they're coordinating that with the cost and everything for the city, we need to figure out how we handle that flow. Not just the, tens of thousands of people live here. We've got tens of thousands of people live south of us that come through here. So
I would think that since the county kind of manages our signals, right?
Some, and then the state, ODOT manages the ones, kind of the key ones, unfortunately, at 213 and whatnot. So it's a combination.
don't they have video cameras? They can see the flow of all those lights that they control?
We have several in town. I don't know that ODOT has them on their signals on 213. The one you go through every day at Redland and Abernathy, there's not a camera on that one. We have some cameras on Washington. We have some cameras on Beaver Creek, top of the hill. They're really just more for day-to-day, traffic analysis from the county and from
These
staff.
evacuation routes are for what kind of event? Fire? Are we talking Cascadia subduction zone earthquake that's going to take out bridges and cause landslides?
It's a great question. I've not heard a statement that says this evacuation route is for fire, this one's for earthquake. I took this more as fire related because fire was mentioned a few times during that meeting. I don't know that they are trying to get their evacuation routes to account for a subduction zone earthquake. I could be wrong, but I don't think that's the case.
Also, then we can go the reverse way in flooding. Because if you go down to 14 Corners and you stop inside that restaurant in there, the tavern, you can see the high water marks of the various floods. It's
Right.
pretty fascinating when you're standing there and thinking, the water was this high,
Yeah, certainly.
you know? So then that would make the flow going south instead of north, for thing there.
You're gonna wanna stay home.
Yeah.
No, one thing,
Not going to food courts.
Yeah.
one thing I can mention, so in, I think it was 21, when we had the evacuation notice, so the county learned some lessons during that time. And the biggest lesson was, it probably wasn't a good idea to put the entire city of Oregon City on a level 1 evacuate now notice. Now, that being said, it's the county and their system, right? When they issue the level 3, get ready, level 2, be prepared, level 1, go now. They talk about it a fair amount in different emergency management meetings I've been in, and they do realize that that in itself was a huge contributing factor to all of the gridlock in town. Because it wasn't just, Holcomb, Redland, that area.
Right.
It was all over town.
Yeah.
So,
And the people in those were in level 2 zones, and they all decided to pick up and leave.
right.
3 was Bradley, right at Bradley was the division line for class 3. And I think when you look at Southern California and the Pacific Palisades, and there, majority of the people who were trapped was because of routes were blocked. And they had no traffic control devices functioning on Pacific Coast Highway to get people out from those hills out there. And I think they're gonna go back and they're gonna look at how messed up that was, because they had nobody, traffic was just piling up, and then you had trucks, bulldozers just pushing cars away so that the fire trucks could get through, because people were abandoning their cars. That could happen here. Very similar situation. So I'm glad to see that, that's starting to develop. I mean, at least talking about it. But I think when you go to another one of these meetings, you need to mention to them about these signs. Actually publishing a route, evacuation route, and it could be, maybe they could classify them different things. If it's evacuation fire route, or if it's flooding, it would be probably the other way.
Right.
And if it's in a tsunami, to avoid crossing, I'm sorry, not tsunami, for earthquake, avoid crossing the Abernathy Bridge.
I think.
Well, they're working on to get that one to stand.
Because right now, it's not doing very well.
But we do have the signage for 99 to get people up onto South End and
Correct.
Central Point. So
Yep.
there is that type of signage.
I would encourage city, I guess, since a lot of that movement, especially outside of city, is going through a city, how do we assure that those signals will be working, like that we have a power? Like, what if there's a fire, but there's power outage? Now you got signals not working, or it's flashing and it's just creating a, jam. Is it getting the police out there and regulating, like having a better plan? I think we should be doing something like that, and or Public Works getting out there and moving traffic versus like.
So how long, that's a good question, because how long does this traffic control device run on its own battery pack? Or is there
They
any
don't.
better?
Really. I mean, if a light is out, that means it has no power. If the light is in flash, that means it has power, but there's something wrong with the control system.
Oh, okay, it's not that they're out of power. So there's none of the traffic devices have backup power on them?
Nope, not to my knowledge.
Okay.
But maybe that's something to consider, like on these critical evacuation routes, if you have signals, like can we do something where we could augment?
Is there another power supply or
like
something?
solar power or something, have a backup source to be able to at least do something.
Yeah. Getting back to one of the points you made, Jedemir, emergency happens, people are evacuating, signal goes down. You're absolutely right. It's going to be the police, probably first and foremost, to get down and control that intersection. That's our preference, because the police have a little more authority than Public Works folks. But Public Works folks, whether it's a city or county, would augment that detail. But that's what's just going to happen, have to happen. If a signal.
Yeah, I think it should be part of the plan, like for you guys,
Right.
once the county gets, like, how do we like assure, or is the county like, how do we make sure the network is going to be able to
Right.
work?
And I did hear discussion from at the county level that for fire evacuation, you get down, especially in your area, Tim, Holcomb, Redland, now you're at the mercy of the ODOT signals, right? They're at 213, Prairie Schooner. The county being more proactive about communicating with ODOT and having ODOT personnel either come quickly reprogram those signals to allow a longer queue of vehicles to go through, or to shut them off and then manually flag people through. So,
Interesting.
yep.
Are your traffic lights LEDs now? Or are they
Yes.
just, so they're using a much less power to run them, right?
Yes.
Could a solar panel, somewhere along the grid there be enough power to keep them going in the event of a loss of power?
I'm not sure, Tim. I don't know enough about solar power and how much energy even an LED signal would take.
Yeah.
Possibly, but again, I don't know enough to.
But I'm only thinking of this on the emergency evacuation route, so that if you do lose power, that if there's a backup source to keep the flow going.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're gonna have the backup, because it's gonna defeat the purpose of it.
Or even being able to bring generator and be able to plug in and run it.
Yeah,
And that's a good question too. I don't know if in a modern traffic control box, if they have that capability that if you did bring a generator, if you could actually plug it in. I don't know. That's a very interesting question. Yeah.
So these are other thoughts, that when they're putting this plan together, to think of these, redundant backup systems.
Yeah.
Think of it like an airplane. When you lose hydraulics, there's a backup. When that one backs up, then you get another one. And when that one goes, then you're going down.
Right.
You know?
But at least you had one backup.
Yeah.
Yeah, better than nothing.
Yeah, that's better than,
Well, I mean, when you
in a
think
prayer.
about it, it's, like, when you see how fast can it move and people are desperate and like, it could be a big tragedy. And so we want to make sure the system is being able to move people through.
Agreed.
cool.
Back to Chedamir's point about the signage, and because this is like, I'm thinking about like subscription to like additional road closures, because things change very quickly, especially in a fire. And when there's high winds and things like that, and it can spread much quicker than what we think, oftentimes. So is there a way to, and roads may have to close and things, I'm thinking even on the wildfire in 2021, where people were being told to go is at Clackamas Community College. And then that got shut down, and then they were moving folks, and everybody that was up here was trying to move at the same time, and it created a bunch of traffic. About a month ago, I was leaving my house, and I don't know what exactly happened on 213 and Beaver Creek Road, but the light was out, and there was a sign like, gosh, I think maybe on Malala in 213, I think there was a sign there that said like road closed, but it didn't say anything. It just said road closed up ahead, is what it said.
Was it
And
one of the variable message reader boards
yeah,
that they tow out there?
yeah, it was sitting in the middle, and then I was like, where is it closed, and I kept driving. Had I known it was right there on Beaver Creek,
Right.
I would have turned left on Malala, right? So I kept going, and then traffic was a standstill. Like everybody's having to take a left now
Yeah.
because on Beaver Creek Road, because, like I said, I don't know what exactly happened down on 213, but, all the traffic, that light was out. And so, like, that's what I'm saying. Perfect example. Like, other people could have taken a different route or another option. Now everybody's clustered right there because the signage was passed.
Right.
Like,
The variable message reader boards are great as long as they have a proper message.
right.
And I'm going to totally blame ODOT on this one.
Yeah.
But instead of saying road closed, it could say probably one screen, road closed, next screen, use Malala. That probably would have been
Something-
helpful.
something
Or
like
road
that.
closed at
Whatever street, or 0.2 miles ahead.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so more to come on evacuation stuff as we get it.
I think that's good.
Good.
Okay,
All right.
all right, moving on.
Signage at Trillium Park HOA by you,
Yeah.
Mr. Vance.
So the city was approached by the Trillium Park HOA probably over a year ago with some various traffic questions and asks. We did some analysis at that time, made some recommendations. We, not too long ago, got back with them. And I met with a couple of representatives of the HOA. And there's some things that we, the city, intend on doing, and there's some things that we're still considering. So this is by the hospital, is where the Trillium Park HOA is. And you see at the top there, Gilman Drive. So one of the complaints was people speeding on Gilman. Often there's parking on both sides of Gilman, and when cars are parked on both sides, it gets a bit narrow. Their original ask was to remove parking on one side, and I discussed at length with Dayna, Jason Thornberger, our transportation manager, and it seems maybe not too intuitive, but if a street is narrower, meaning parking on both sides, the general public tends to go a little slower. So if we would have taken away parking on one side, it drastically, I feel very confident, it drastically would have increased the speeds. So I did commit to putting the covert data box out there. We've talked about that many different times here. I want to get it out there, just get some data so I can relay that back to the Trillium Park HOA. I've driven it several times. I have a feeling that most people are probably doing in the 20-mile-an-hour range going up that road. Granted, there's always somebody that has a hot rod, some electric Mustang like Tim has, and speeding down the road.
But that's the people that probably live in that.
I was just gonna say that, it's people that are living there.
Yeah. On that top picture, you see a very crude little red marking there. That is an area that they asked for some no parking signage. There's a couple vehicles parked there. There's, right at that corner, there's a transition on Wake Robin where it kind of goes downhill. And even though from this aerial view, you wouldn't think there's kind of a sight distance issue, but when you drive it, there really is. So we did commit to put a no parking sign here to corner, there on that corner for them, and that should help a little bit for that sight distance issue. The second slide down, so this is on the other side of the hospital, Davis Road, that connects to kind of the other side of the Trillium Park HOA. There are currently 2 no outlet signs on Davis, more towards Division. Apparently, trucks and vehicles will go down Davis to Trillium, and you see the red X there. We agreed we can put another small no outlet sign there, because what they're having is sometimes delivery trucks will miss the loading dock area, and they'll turn on Davis and they get lost, and next thing they know, they're down there on the end of Davis trying to turn around in somebody's driveway. With the truck traffic, we are considering no truck traffic sign, and I think we'll probably put one in there on Davis at Division, because again, if a truck is heading northbound on Division and they get to Davis, they've missed their turn to get to their loading dock. However, turning down Davis, and if you get into that neighborhood where you see Trillium, Bean, not a good place to turn any kind of truck of any size around down there. So we're trying to alleviate that turning movement from trucks turning down Davis.
Well, what about, I mean, they're going, where it says Davis Road, is that where the dock, is that where the dock is?
No, the dock is, again, on this map, for its sake, if you go south from the green X, I think it's that first driveway you see in there.
Just below where it says Willamette Falls Pediatric Group.
Yep.
You see that road, that's their loading. And you see where the walkway goes across from the hospital to the medical office building?
Yeah.
The loading dock is just to the right.
Yep. And
What is that, where it says Davis Road, what's that thing on the back there? Wouldn't that be also some sort of loading dock?
No loading dock back there that I know of. The official one is where,
Okay.
where Chris mentioned.
And that's a parking structure.
Is that what that is?
Where you can see the cars.
Oh, there
That's
you
a
go, yeah.
two-level parking structure.
So the hospital does have a sign on the corner of that driveway in Division that unfortunately says much more than loading dock area, right? So where it says truck loading zone or loading dock, it gets kind of lost in there. So one of my contacts at the Trillium Park HOA is very motivated, and he said he'd be happy to speak with Providence and see if they can put additional signage or allow the city to put in, some signage to help them out there. So that's yet to be determined.
But where it's green, you're gonna say no truck.
No truck traffic,
No truck traffic.
yeah.
And you don't want them continuing down Division, because then they're gonna get to where they either have to go Anchor Way, which they're not gonna be able to make the corner.
Right,
And they're,
yeah, it's
so you wanna try and get them stopped there.
100%. Yeah, you're absolutely right. If you're in a truck and you're headed north on Division and you get past Davis or turn down Davis, you're gonna end up in
Then you're gonna call me for a tow.
Is that what you're doing now? Great,
I dispatch at night.
all right.
What about those, there's no outlet for trucks?
Well, we have two no outlet signs on Davis currently, but they're more towards Division. We don't have specific no outlet for trucks. We think no outlet means no outlet regardless of what you're in. Yeah. So I think the no truck traffic could help. I think, unfortunately, if they get all the way down to Davis and Trillium, having a no truck traffic, or a no outlet, could help. I think really what will help is additional signage at the driveway that they're supposed to take. The HOA did ask about speed humps, so I shared with them our city website that has our speed hump packet and all the different things that they need to do. I talked with them about it. They seemed interested in speed humps. They didn't really specify what streets.
I was just gonna say where.
They didn't specify. If I had to guess, it's probably more on the Gillum. But as, it's maybe been a while since we've all looked at our speed hump criteria. There's a lot of criteria that needs to be met. It would come before TAC. The city engineer would need to sign off on it, and then the neighborhood would have to figure out how to finance it. So again, they've got that information. I just haven't heard back from them yet if they want to pursue it or not.
So can they use the portable speed humps
If they request them,
to
yes.
see if it's,
We can
if
put
it'll
them
make an
out.
impact before they
Yep.
spend the 10 grand or whatever per hump?
Yep, and I mentioned that to them also, if they want to try it out.
I remember our entire discussion on speed humps and stuff, but if there's a calming benefit to public in general, why would city do it?
It's a good question. I don't have an answer for you. I see where you're going with that, and I think there's some merit to that. It's just been this city policy
No, I
for years.
understand.
But I don't know why that concept hasn't been talked about.
I think where it's a perception or if we put this, it's gonna, it's gonna calm down and we see the benefit, but there's traffic calming devices that work and are beneficial, and I think for overall public, but if somebody insists, if the city went out there and says, we have a data, speeds and stuff, this is really not a problem, and they're insisting, then I think they should pay. But where you if we do this, we're gonna see benefit, then I think that would be something the city should be doing.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only caveat to that would be speed humps are very contentious. People seem to love them or hate them. And it's not, totally a deal killer, but the city would, to do it the right way, would need to do some really good public outreach for the neighbors, the neighborhood in that area. Because if the city went and installed speed humps and didn't tell anybody or didn't get a good buy-off from the neighborhood, I think the repercussions of that would not be good.
I 100% agree. I'm just thinking like, you have to go through the process. You have to go to get the, buy-in. But like, I'm just saying like, we're definitely like, if we do this, if we put this, signage, if we do curb bump outs and all these things that we know that's going to improve the safety for people, then I think that's something, city should be planning for. But like when somebody's just like, hey, we just want speed bumps, but in reality, they're not really doing
They don't want to
anything,
pay for them.
then they should be paying for them.
Right, agreed.
Maybe it should be a city partnership, with, with the HOA or the community where it's at. That there's a total buy-in, so the city's not gonna invest any of their resources.
Right.
Unless the residents are for it, and if the city can show that the data will, give a result.
Cheddarmere mentioned bump outs. So you extend the curb out, it bumps out to narrow.
Yeah, the traffic.
That travel way. I actually quite like those, and I think in some cases they can be very effective, and they don't give that disruption that a speed hump does, that I think is the reason a lot of people don't like them. And in previous life, when I worked for the city of Tigard would install speed humps at the request of neighborhood associations, things like that. And there was a couple times in my 12 years there that we ended up removing speed humps because although they slowed people down, the complaint was the noise from the landscape trucks, from the delivery trucks, from whatever, bouncing over the speed hump and just making a big racket.
I think definitely there are different ways to achieving the same outcome. So,
Other than speed humps.
yes.
Yeah. Yep, agreed. Okay,
Cool.
all right. Thank you for your questions on that. We're gonna revisit an intersection we've talked about quite a bit before. Gaffney and Berta. And the reason we're talking about it again is over the years, the city's had several requests to make it a three-way stop. And the city has been hesitant because it hasn't met the criteria for a three-way stop. I must apologize. I did not bring that criteria with me, so I apologize for that. But some of you that have been on TAC for a while may have remembered that, it has been discussed. The city engineer said, sorry, it doesn't meet the criteria. That being said, we still get people saying this really should be a three-way stop. I've driven it many times. Jason Thornburg, transportation manager, has driven it many times. Really the last person to mention it is a gentleman named Vance Tong, who was, I think you'll remember Vance, he was a TAC board member. He lives in the area. And he's like, Vance, you really should look at that again. And so we did. And I spoke with Dayna about it because ultimately it's her decision as a public works director and current city engineer. And she's open to it. So I thought I'd bring it to you folks for some discussion and input. That being said, the city is not dead set. We are not putting them in, or we are putting them in. We're considering it. And, again, I'd like to hear any input you guys may have for or against.
I'm sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
I'm looking this and I don't know the dimensions, but it seems like you have a lot of area. I wonder if we could put on those traffic circles.
I don't think we have that much real estate. Yeah.
The one on Gaffney coming south, or from the south, I guess, going, northbound, that side of the road gets very wide. And I think if you did put a stop sign there, you'd have to put a say, no right, what's the thing? No right on red.
I think this the adder is
Three-way,
right turn.
It's a three-way stop all the way you know, all
Yeah.
stop you. It's not like you can just keep, you know, like some streets you can.
Right.
If you're turning right, you can go, but if you're going straight, you have to stop.
So I think what you're getting at is if we made it a three-way stop, we would want the rider on the bottom that says all way.
All way, yeah.
Well,
Because that's a very wide area there, and you'd see these people try to cheat around somebody to.
Yeah.
Wasn't there, like, just before Julie and I came on TAC, wasn't there a discussion about this, and didn't you do something with that southeast corner?
We did. This is one of the things that Board Member Bruce Freeze had brought up. And the improvements we did at that time were, if you see the straight part of Gaffney Lane where it's going at a 45-degree angle to the northeast, approximately where that white car you see in the picture, we put a stop sign ahead sign there. That large tree was kind of blocking the stop sign itself. So we added that signage. The stop sign and stop bar that you see where the red X, that was existing. If you were to imagine going completely across the street, right where Audrey's arrow is, there's a landscape area, and we put some delineators there. They're black with red reflective dots because there have been at least one incident where somebody went through that intersection. I don't know that those would have helped, but we thought it would be a good measure. So people coming southwest on Gaffney, and they get that intersection, if somehow they missed the stop sign, they would see those delineators that would, you know, have that barrier there so they wouldn't think they're going straight. The other thing we did is on Berta, on each side of the road, we painted the curb yellow for approximately 30 feet because occasionally cars would park there on Berta close to the intersection. And that really was for people crossing Berta, to have a little more sight distance for people to cross Berta safely. So those were the improvements that were done a few years ago. You know, if we were to do a three-way stop, we would obviously install the signage, we would install stop bars, we would install stop ahead signs prior to the intersection.
You do have a three-way at Berta and Claremont.
Yes, there is one there, correct.
What about installing a crosswalk on all three of those?
That's definitely on the table also.
So that would.
We didn't, I don't think we did the crosswalk markings because it wasn't a stop, as I recall. Although it's at the intersection, and legally, if a pedestrian is there and they have one foot on the pavement, cars are supposed to stop, right? Because the pedestrian has a right of way at that point. I think this going to a three-way stop, we would definitely consider crosswalk markings.
what about, I mean, I think you would have to, this whole kind of like right movement, you would want to extend the curb along Gaffney and then recurb all that stuff. And then I think at that, you know, I don't know how many pedestrians are moving in there. I mean, at that point, you could narrow down that, do a bulb out, and then maybe do a raised intersection to do the whole slow down. And so I think that you know, that's going to be complete. Not only they're going to stop, but it's going to be a complete
Right.
traffic calming thing there. They're not going to be rushing through there.
Or putting those little flickers in that pie-shaped area there so that people are not, make it more square.
Right.
The turning is,
Yeah, yeah.
they won't be coming.
I'm not sure.
That space.
I do agree with you gentlemen, that, you know, over the years, that corner, the inside of that corner has grown, right? There's several different patches of asphalt because people drive off the asphalt, make a little rut, add a little asphalt. So it's grown over the years. I think to make it a good three-way stop, we would want to alter that corner somewhat. For pedestrian traffic, the information I've got, the vast majority of it is going across Berta, just on that northwest side of Gaffney, because there's no sidewalks on Gaffney,
I was
unfortunately.
just gonna say, and there's no walkers from Gaffney Lane from the elementary.
I don't know. I wouldn't
because
say
there's
there's
no
walkers,
sidewalks.
but we haven't seen
Yeah, I don't think so.
many pads. Again, unfortunately, Gaffney Lane, when it was developed however many years ago, sidewalks weren't a priority.
Now, the gentleman, I believe that lived at 13575 had an issue with, having, in front of his property. Was it having that 30-foot yellow marked out? Or was it the stoplight, the stop sign?
Yeah, as I recall, he seemed to be.
Oh, he was in favor?
Yeah, he was good.
I thought there was somebody in there that was,
Yeah.
giving you a little feedback.
I think
Not
that
on-
house
not
sold
on-
recently too.
That one, I don't think.
It sold recently, new owner?
I think in the last year or two.
You probably
What's
got
that,
tired.
Julie?
I think somebody, or that house was sold, I think, in the last year.
Well, I
so.
think anything you make to make that whole, if you're living there and if you make the safer intersection,
Yeah.
people are all for it.
Yeah, and, you know, I'm not sure if all of you have had opportunity to drive that intersection, and not just drive it once, but take the time to drive it from Gaffney to Gaffney Lane, from Gaffney to Berta.
I use it a lot.
Yeah, I figured you were out there for sure.
Yeah.
So you know the intersection well. It's an
Yeah.
odd intersection, and
I use so I shouldn't, but I come across Claremont Way from Leland and then take a right on Berta and then a left on Gaffney. So I go that way, but I always stop because I don't trust any of those.
when you're on Berta, yeah.
It looks, my kid was like going out to Gaffney for soccer practices and stuff, and I was like, yeah, I wasn't. And this is before you guys did some of those other improvements. It was really like
Right.
awkward.
Right.
I always drive up to Fred Meyer's from here, and I will say, when I take Gaffney and there's school, there's always a backup, like, for the cars trying to get into the school to pick up their kids, and then you have cars going and zipping around the cars that are waiting.
Oh, down around to the
Yeah,
south where the school is.
and then
Yeah.
you have that curve there, you know, it's just like, oh my gosh, like,
Yep.
people just get impatient with the school and the cars just start to back up. I mean, it depends what time of day you go over there, but like, it just seems like it's very busy. Plus then now there's a lot of cars parked on the sides of Gaffney. And so when you add that
Right.
in there, it's just.
And if they're by the school, they're parked illegally, by the way, because we have no parking signs on the one side. Yeah.
So, yeah, and then you get into this, you
Right.
know, and so, yeah, it doesn't feel very safe around.
Well, yeah, and I don't know what was the original intent. You know, maybe most of the volume is on really Gaffney Lane and Bertha doesn't have much, but definitely
Yeah.
the whole intersection configuration looks really.
Yeah.
I would just like to echo comments that have been said before, that it sounds like we're leaning to recommending stop signs, in part because I haven't heard anyone say anything against the stop sign, any reason why people would say, oh, we shouldn't put in stop signs because stop signs could lead to X, Y, or Z bad thing. And then also when we put those in, strong recommendation to bulb outs, medians, building up the intersection so that it's raised, all of those things that help calm traffic. Naturally, it doesn't require us to change the speed limits, but just help encourage good behavior
Yeah.
on the part of drivers.
Yeah, good points. I can tell you that I would foresee, if the decision is made to go ahead and make it a three-way stop, we would make it a three-way stop, do the appropriate signage, and bulb outs, you know, redoing the intersection greatly, doing a raised part. That would be a whole nother project at a later date. So, you know, it would be a case where, frankly, we can put stop bars and all the signage out there relatively inexpensively and hopefully gain some benefit for the motoring public and pedestrians.
What's your process? So if we think that is a good idea, then what is your next
I
step
have
for?
a conversation with Dayna and relay to her, your folks' input. And ultimately, it's her decision. But she's open. That's the reason I'm here tonight, because I discussed it with her, and she's open to discussing it. And
I have to make a motion to recommend this, or?
You could. I didn't really think of that, Jennifer, to be honest with you. Again, my intent was just to have discussion, get your input. That actually sounds like not a bad idea, if you'd be so inclined.
So before we make the motion, is there enough room to allow traffic to go straight and turn right and then make a kind of like a triangle with 2 stop signs on that north thing? Or would you want to just fill that space in and make them make a sharp right?
Right, I see where we're going with that. There's not enough room there for that, unfortunately. And if anything, we would we wouldn't have such a wide radius,
great if you got a
long
semi.
radius there. We would choke that up a little bit in the intersection.
Or school buses too, yeah.
Right, and that is a consideration too.
That's something we have to
We
look at.
can't take what's that nice, very gradual curb line that you see, or pavement line, I don't think there's curb there, and make it a 90, because I think we'd really disrupt
Be hard for the
buses and things like
buses.
that. When I've thought about this, I have a feeling that if we do end up making a 3-way stop, we may get some folks that commute on Gaffney, coming up from around the school area neighborhood, and they zig and they zag and they get out to Malala, that they may have a complaint that it slows them down a little bit. And that's unfortunate, and I understand,
That's the purpose.
but I think it would benefit a greater number of the
I
motoring
agree.
and pedestrian public.
Well, I think if you put in 3 stops, maybe paint off that huge turning radius and shorten it up, so maybe it's 3 stripes and mark it out. And then eventually you can do a project where you can build a filler or something in it.
Yeah.
And put crosswalks in there. That'll call a lot more attention that this is a place you're gonna have to stop. You cannot keep blasting through.
Yeah.
Plus you got the school right over there, so it makes sense to at least have a way for them to get across the street, even though there's no sidewalks there.
Right. And crosswalk wise, currently, from the lack of sidewalks, we would probably just do one on Berta going across. Because you see the sidewalk there at the corner of Berta and Gaffney, which is pretty heavily used. So that's the natural sort of progression for people to come across there. Because if they cross to the south of Gaffney on Berta, well, beyond Gaffney, there's no sidewalk on the north side. We'd be transporting people into somewhere where we shouldn't, because there's no sidewalk.
Gotcha.
Well, I thought I heard a motion from Chedemir, so I'd be willing to second that. If you did make a motion, Chedemir.
Well, I make a motion for city staff to look at intersection of Bertha and Gaffney and implement 3-way stop in an interim, and then if there's funds and it makes sense to do further improvements to intersection, do that later time.
Okay, I second that.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining? Are you hearing none? This motion is passed unanimously.
Great, and seriously, I want to thank all of you for all your comments. It is definitely helpful.
All right. Oh, there's communications.
I do have something on communications. I wanted to thank Audrey for inviting us to the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities in-person open house, which took place on February 10th. And I got a chance to meet with city staff. It was well attended by members of the public as well. I'm not sure if there were any other TAC members there, but, I just was there as a representative of myself. I did introduce myself as a member of TAC, but maybe not representing TAC along the lines of what Jake was talking about. And city staff provided good presentation. They have slides that they could bring to TAC at some point in the near future if we're interested in this. It really does
relate to that thorny question 7 that we have on the interview panel. Just, you know, how does land use and transportation interact? I mean, if you really want to know how the rubber is meeting the road in terms of, you know, land use interacting with transportation, this is where it's happening, because the state is requiring, short story here, that every city in the state go through these questions having to do with, you know, how much parking we're allowing, what kind of alternative use are we encouraging for transportation as it relates to development proposals. So it's complex, but it does involve some decision points for the city. And there are some questions that, you know, it's not all state mandates. The state just mandates that we consider some of these things, so that we do have some opportunities for maybe adding our own spin to it a little bit. So there could be a TAC recommendation or two that comes out of all this. Anyway, my recommendation, if you all are interested, is that we invite the planning department, whatever planning staff might be available for our next meeting or the meeting after, just so that we can provide input as a TAC board into this process before it all gets to city commission and the state.
I have a couple of questions. I don't know if that would be on a future agenda or just general communication, but the Clackamas County is going to go through a transportation system plan. I know that they have ordered the consultant, and so some of their infrastructure is kind of running through Oregon City. So question is, you know, is city going to be engaging and being part of that process?
I've heard the answer to that is yes. What I don't know, Chetamir, is who from the city, and what level. I've heard it discussed that the city does want a seat at the table with the county when it comes to TSP. If the county has a seat at the table for us, I would have to assume they do. Question better suited to Dayna, because again, it's just kind of what I've overheard about the TSP. That's definitely more in the engineering realm there for us. But I know that, I can assure you, even though that's an engineering function, the city would really like to be a part of that TSP.
I'll add it to our next agenda.
And then, you know, there's the work on Abernathy Bridge keeps going, but I think it's taking longer than what they envisioned. At some point, maybe getting an update in terms of, like, you know, is ODOT going to be doing congestion pricing, or are they going to be tolling, like, and that would be interesting.
Yeah, that's definitely something we can reach out to ODOT and see if we can get somebody to either give us some information we can share or come present. So I heard congestion pricing, tolling, and maybe an update on the progress of the actual work that's being done now. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
There was an email that Dayna copied me on, so she's reached out to them and we're just waiting to hear back.
Oh, good. Great.
All right, any other future agenda items that we should put on for our next meeting? I think getting a,
Are we meeting in May then?
that would be nice to have some update, because it doesn't look like they're doing much lately on the bridge.
Yeah.
It's kind of light.
You know, I'm
They
around
are,
the
but I
bridge.
think
Well,
it's
they're
cumbersome
working.
work.
I see guys working.
A the cranes aren't moving. The balls are staying still.
I don't know what phase they're on, if they're in a phase of the work where it's underneath, I'm not sure, Tim.
Well, and I saw where one of the northbound entrance is gonna be closed from 10B to 5A. Is it
I'm not familiar with
20th and 21st, I think?
Not sure on that one, Chris.
Yeah, I was impressed how many holes they've been drilling in existing and putting, epoxying the steel so they can. So yeah, I'm sure, what is it? Is it delayed couple years?
I've not heard a time, Chetmere. Yeah.
I heard something through Great Oregon City Watershed Council, we got something from their, so the Abernathy Creek comes in, and right now they got cranes sitting in essentially in Abernathy Creek, I mean, not in the creek, but it's on platform, and that they would be restoring the mouth of Abernathy like in 27 or 28, something like that.
What's that storm sewer project? They're putting the pipe in along there?
Are you talking about the West, the Water Environment Services?
Yeah.
I think it's an outfall project that comes from their treatment plant on Agnes. And it's that very large pipe that they bored.
Right.
So they were going to open cut from their treatment plant to basically the traffic circle on the Main Street extension, okay? That's still in progress. The pipe is 90 inches. I mean, it's ginormous. So they're still doing that portion. The boring machine, clack-a-mole, did get set into the ground right there next to the traffic circle, and it bored its way all the way to the middle of the Willamette River, and they removed that about a month ago. They removed the actual boring machine from the middle of the river out. So as far as I understand, that portion of the pipe, they're inspecting and making any kind of repairs they may or may not need to do. I don't know if the project is on time or not. Clackamas County, I will say, if you just Google Clack-a-Mole or the county website, they're doing a pretty good job of updating the website on their progress.
So Agnes is a city, it's a city right away, right?
Yeah.
Does city have intention, once all this work is done, because I'm sure once they put this gigantic pipe,
There won't be much of Agnes left.
but now I don't know, the issue of settlement and stuff. Is it possible to look at the rebuilding Agnes and making that connection?
That's a good question. And, years ago, it used to connect through.
Yes.
And then Wes built their treatment plant, and at some point, the decision was made. I don't know if the city.
It was unsafe.
It was a fun road.
So it was fun in 1984 when I was in high school, jumping that. But at some point, Agnes used to go through all the way. I think, I'm just guessing, when Wes built their treatment plant, I don't know if the city vacated right of way. There's a fence in the way, but there's still physically some roadway there where you could go through, but it's been closed to the public for through traffic for a long, long time. And in fact, Wes has had a gate maybe 3/4 of the way down Agnes, so people didn't get all the way to the water treatment plant and turn around. One, so people don't get lost and have to go there and turn around, and two, to keep people from parking there and doing nefarious activities.
So is this pipe, is it transporting stormwater or treated sewage?
Yeah, treated.
Treated sewage?
Yep.
To dump into the Willamette?
Yep.
And then off its way. How's it getting there now?
Their old line. There's always been a line there.
Okay. But not the size or
Much
capacity?
smaller,
Okay.
right, and quite old.
They're going further into the river to achieve the mixing zone. Because it's not tertiary treatment. I think they have a membrane treatment, but that's still not. So they have to dilute it
So
somewhere.
they get us some, yeah, I don't know how I came across the story about it, but it was quite interesting. They had that clack-a-mole thing machine that they were doing, and these huge pipes. So kind of a silent project that all of a sudden became public knowledge.
Yeah.
interesting. All right. Well, hearing none other discussions, I will adjourn this meeting tonight at 7:59. Thank you all for attending. The meeting is now adjourned.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.